All right, I will say good morning, a beautiful daf ahead of us today. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors. Thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves. Thank the entire Daf Yomi share for dedicating the shiurim this month for the aliyah for the neshama of Mr. Milton Martyr, Mordechai David Ben Rafal HaKohen, Zichron Livracha. To thank the Elbam Mishpacha for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this month in commemoration of the yard site of Jerry Elbam, Yaakov Koppel, Ben Rav Avram Menachem. To thank our week of learning sponsors, Paul and Kathy Pollack, for dedicating the learning this week in the Schus of Floor Shlema for Rabbi David Katz, Rav David HaKohen Ben Leah, and to thank Saeed and Sima Haken for dedicating the shiurim this week. Le'ili Nishmas Sima's parents, Miriam Bas Elazar and Yecheskel Ben Agos Sela. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama Slav and Aliyah, and the family Zainachama. I will say with that, let us begin. We have a really exciting daf ahead of us today, packed with a lot of great concepts. Today's daf is Ayin Ches 78, and we're actually picking up on Ayin Zayin Days 77b, and we left off 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 lines up from the bottom. So I will say, let's get started. Tanya. So an interesting concept here. Sorry. Tanya. Ha'omer le'ishto. Man says to his wife, Kol Nedarim shetaduri, efshi shetaduri. So we'll say very interesting lashon here. A man says to his wife, Reuben is married to Rachel, and Reuben says to Rachel, Rachel, any Nedarim that you make, I don't want you to make. Right? Any Nedarim you make, I don't want you to vow. Efshi shetaduri, I don't want the vows. So we'll say, or, in the neder, or he says to her, any neder you make is not a neder. Lo amar klum. Ultimately, again, he has not said anything. So let's analyze this for just a moment. I will say, so take a quick look. Take a quick look. Actually, yes. So no, let's finish the Gemara first. So okay, so that's the first statement, right? So he says to his wife, any nedarim that you will make, I don't want, or any neder you make ultimately is not a neder. Such a statement is meaningless. Yafe asis ve'in k'moseich. Let's say I will say so. That's on what we'll call the revocation side. What about on the affirmation side? Let's say he says to her, Yafe asis. So we'll say in this case, Rachel made a neder. Right after she makes the neder, he says shkoyach. Right, Yafe asis. Good job. Right, ve'in k'moseich. Or listen to this. After she makes the neder, he says, Rachel, there's no one like you. Or or he says, Rachel, had you not made that neder, I would have compelled you to make that neder. Then ultimately, again, dvarav kayamin. These statements apparently work as an affirmation. So I will say, so two different cases. In case number one, Rachel made the neder, and he's saying, any nedarim you make, I don't want. Or the nedarim you make are not a neder. So the Gemara tells us that is not a revocation. Conversely, she makes a neder and he says, shkoyach, good job, there's no one like you in the world. Or, had you not made that neder, I would have told you to make that neder. That is a proper affirmation. So what's going on over here? So I'll say, take a look at let's start with the rush. So we'll say, see the rush is in the left-hand column. This rush, you could actually just pick it up 2, 4, 5 lines up from before it gets wide. So look at the Rush says, Dile'inyan hafara ein moil ela lishna dikra atshira mufar lechi. So what is the Gemara teaching me? Gemara is teaching a very interesting halacha. When it comes to hafaras naros, remember again, every day we have to review our terms. Hafaras nadarim refers to which process? Father to a daughter, husband to a wife. Good. What's involved in hafara? What's involved? Right? It's all we'll call right now. We'll just focus on the husband. It's a husband-driven process. Where he simply has the power to revoke the neder of his wife. That's the power he has. The Rosh says what the Gemara is coming to teach me is the only way hafara works is if there is an explicit lashon of hafara. I am mefer this neder. I revoke this neder. That's ultimately, again, so you have to use, why? Because the lashon of hafara, that lashon hafara, I am mefer, that's the lashon of the Torah. So therefore, again, when a husband wants to go ahead and revoke the neder of his wife, he has to use the proper biblical lashon. At Shumar Mufar Lechi. So we'll say, and that's why again, if he uses these other lashonos, I will say, and here's what's interesting: in these other lashonos, it's absolutely unequivocally clear how the husband feels about his wife's nedarim. Right? How does he feel about them? How does he feel about them? He doesn't want them. Right? He says to her, I don't like your nedarim. I don't want you to make nedarim. That's a pretty clear expression of intent. Expression of intent is not enough. What do you need? Explicit expression of hafara. Okay. Conversely, listen to this. Aval le'inyan hakama, the Rosh says, Dafilu shtika mo'eles im shasa kalayom kiyum nami moel b'chalosham. This is fascinating. They will say, on the other hand, this is so interesting. How do you accomplish kiyum? How does a husband affirm his wife's neder? How does he affirm it? He doesn't have to do anything. In other words, affirmation is accomplished through silence. Right? Remember again, if the husband hears the neder and does absolutely nothing for the day that he hears it, then halacha l'maisa what? The neder is affirmed. So because affirmation takes place even through complete passivity, is passivity a word? Passiveness? Passivity, right? Ultimately, again, therefore what? All you need is a basic expression of intent. So when he says, shkoyach, that's enough. That's enough. Or you're the best, right? You're the best. You know what Rachel's thinking after Reuven says you're the best. This is when you compliment me, right? Right? What about all the other times, right? Forget about the Nedarim. This is what you give me a shkoyach for. In any event, let's say. So what's the idea? It's just fascinating. So when it comes to revocation, where the Torah gives me explicit lashon, that's the only lashon that revokes an eder. Affirmation, which could be done in a totally passive fashion, any lashon of affirmation will work to confirm the neder. So fascinating. And I will say, that's actually, we'll see this. We'll see this in the Rambam. The Rambam says over here, the Ketzad Mekayim, this is the Rambam, Hilchos Nedarim, Parak Yud Gimel, Halacha Gimel, Kigon Shiyomer La, Kayim Lechi, O Yafa Nadart, O In Kamoseich, O Ilu Nadart Heisi Madrei, V'gol Yitzud Rav Sharatza B'Neder Zeh. The Rambam writes, Halacha L'maisa, affirmation could take place through any type of positive lashon. Any type of affirmative lashon works, which makes sense, because remember, I don't even need an expression of intent for affirmation. As long as he hears it and does nothing, he also affirms the neder. Therefore, any lashon of affirmation will work. But halacha l'maisa that Rambam paskins, again, so that's in Parak Yud Gimel Halacha Gimel. It goes out, the hafara is in Parak Yud Gimel Pasuk Beis. The Rambam says in that case, halacha l'maisa, you need a lashon of hafara. So halacha l'maisa, you need an explicit lashon of hafara in order to annul the neder, but any positive lashon will ultimately confirm the neder. Incredible. Let's go back. We'll say first wide line, Ayin Zayin Amud Beis 77b. Lo yomer adam leishta b'Shabbos mufar lechi bat alechi chedech shor lo b'chol. Another interesting halacha. So remember again in yesterday's daf, we established the idea that you could do hafaras nedarim on Shabbos. And I will say, so the truth is hafaras nedarim you could certainly do on Shabbos, especially the way we paskin. Remember, we paskin halacha l'maisa. What's the window? What's the window for affirmation or revocation by hataras nedarim? 1 day. What type of day? Calendar day, right? Not Meslay. So now that we know that it's only a calendar day, so certainly you could do it on Shabbos, because if you preclude a person from doing this on Shabbos, what could happen? A person could totally lose out on the opportunity to revoke or to confirm. Well, confirmation happens de facto, but loses out on the opportunity to revoke the neder. Now what the Gemara is saying is like this. If a man is going to be made for his wife's neder, if he's going to revoke the neder on Shabbos, he has to use a different lashon. He shouldn't say, Lo yomer adam la ishta b'Shabbos, mufar lechi, the neder is mufar, batal lechi, or the neder is batal, kederach she'omer la b'chol. These are all expressions that he could go ahead and use during the week to go ahead and revoke the neder. Ela omer la, listen to this, tili va'achli, tili ushasi. So we'll say, let's give the example of this. Let's say halacha l'maisa, so Rachel made a neder not to eat bread. Let's just use it as a simple example. So during the week, if he wanted to go and revoke that neder, what would he do? He would say to her, mufar lechi, the neder is mufar, or batal lechi, the neder is batal. That's also good enough lashon of hafara. On Shabbos, he shouldn't use that same lashon. Rather, what should he do? He should say, Rachel, have a piece of challah. Now we'll say, what's the effect of saying Rachel, have a piece of challah? He's effectively being made for the neder. Right? By telling her to have a piece of challah, What he's saying is, I'm annulling your neder. Tali va'achli, tali v'shasi, v'neder batal me'elav, and the neder is batal on its own. Now what's the logic behind this? Take a look at, you could even go back to the Rush for just a moment again. So this time the Rush is in 4 lines into the wide lines, the end of the fourth wide line. Lo yomar adon leishto b'Shabbos mufar lechi geder shon lo b'chol shetzarich l'shanos mipnei kavod Shabbos. So I will say, the Rush highlights over here that the obligation over here is to go ahead and to change the way in which one does hafaras nedarim on Shabbos. That's the idea, that on Shabbos one should do hafaras nedarim in a different way. Now, if you take a look at the Rush, I will say, so the Rush is in the wide lines as well. The Rush is actually also 4 lines, that's interesting, 4 lines into the wide line, the end of the fourth wide line. Fascinating. Actually, same thing as the Rush. Tanya lo yomer adam leishto b'Shabbos mufar lechi batal lechi geder shon lo b'chol hadasin lememer hachi lad mishum gzer dehetzer nedarim dechacham dehakevan de'amar la tzli achli yitzarach Shabbos uva afilu kishal shar el taima demilsa dechevan shef shal shalem b'shanina. Rabbi say, the Rush says like this. Sorry, the Ran says something as the Ran. In general, whatever you could do differently on Shabbos, we do differently on Shabbos. It's important to make constant, consistent distinctions between Shabbos and the weekday. Therefore, the Gemara is saying over here is like this. Does a husband have a right to be made for his wife's neder on Shabbos? Absolutely. But do it differently than the way you do it during the week. So during the week, a husband would say, mufar lech, or batal lech. On Shabbos, he could just say, Rachel, let's assume Rachel made the neder not to eat a piece of bread. If he tells her, Rachel, have a piece of challah, take a piece of challah, that is effective revocation of the neder. However, qualification. However, again, what does he have to do? As much as he's not making a positive statement of revocation, ultimately in his heart, he has to make a positive statement of revocation. Take a look at the Ran again, 1 line down below, 6 lines into the wide line. So we'll say at least cognitively, he has to say to himself, the neder should be batal. The neder should be batal. Good. So we'll say, so again, just fascinating halakha. So again, this is building on a couple of things. Number 1, hafaras nedarim could be done on Shabbos. But even though hafaras nedarim could be done on Shabbos, be mefer in a different way. Be mefer in a different way, right? So in other words, instead, it's fascinating. Instead of being mefer in the negative, this neder is mufar, this neder is batal, be mefer in the positive. What's the positive? Take a piece of challah. Take a piece of challah, but in your heart, you should say, I'm being mevatel the neder. Tanya B'Shamai says, B'Shabbos mevatel b'liv b'chol mosi b'svasav. B'Shamai says on Shabbos, you're mevatel the neder. Really, it means that you're made for the neder in your heart. And during the week, you articulate it. Beis Hillel says, Echad zeh v'echad zeh mevatel b'libo, v'ein tzarach lahotzi b'svasav. So Rabbi says it's very interesting. Beis Hillel says the truth is, this Shabbos mechanism that we're highlighting over here, technically it works during the week as well. In other words, that even during the week, Rachel made the neder not to eat bread. Not to eat bread. And now what happens? Reuben says, you know what? Take a piece of bread. Take a piece of bread. That is effective hafaras nedarim. As long as what? He's mevatel b'libo. Now, I just want to point out, this is really very interesting because the previous sugya just said that what? The previous sugya said that what's hafaras nedarim? What's hafaras nedarim? Hafaras nedarim is an explicit lashon of hafara. And in fact, if you use these other lashonos, it doesn't work. So it seems to be the one exception to this is a husband telling a wife to engage in the very activity that she prohibited through her neder, ein hafara gidola mizo. Right? That by itself is hafara, even though he's not using the lashon of mefer or he's not using the lashon of batel. So again, since on Shabbos, we want to do things a little bit differently than during the week, that's he should do hafara, but in his heart, he should go to be mevatel the neder. Incredible. So the Gemara goes right. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Chacham shar b'lashon Baal ubashma b'lashon Chacham lo Amar Klum. Now, that's very interesting. So remember, here now our worlds are coming together. So remember again. Now we'll say when a Chacham, what power does a Chacham have over a neder? What power does he have over a neder? Hatara, right? Hatara. Remember again, what's Hatara? Hatara is annulment of the neder. Annulment of the neder. Now we'll say, what does annulment of the neder do? It shuts the neder down here and now. How do you accomplish Hatara? Right? Charata. Charata. So it is a machlokes, charata or Pesach, but we've already seen we paskin charata. Okay, so now we'll say, so that means that when a chacham is matir a neder, I will say, what lashon does a chacham use? What lashon? Mutter, right? I will say, by the way, I just want to point out to you, all of us are going to appreciate Hataras Nedarim so much more this year, right? Why? Because I'm actually going to have a chance of knowing what it is that I'm doing. Right? I will say, remember again, what do I say when I stand before a Beis Din? And I will say, by the way, what kind of Beis Din are you standing in front of? Yeah, right. Don't say like so disparagingly, right? Like I have bundles, those hediotos, right? Those hediotos. So say that now I get it. Now I get it. By the way, now it's a basin of hediotos, basin of regular people, including even relatives. Right? I could even use relatives. And now, what am I saying? What's the core phrase of Hataras? The core phrase, bekulhon ischaratna. That's it. I have charata. There's no Pesach. There's no, I made the neder to do this, and had I known then what I know now? No, I have charata. And I will say, what's the Beis Din speaking part of Hataras Nedarim? Hakol you mutarin lach. Hakol shiruyin lach. Ein kan. Lo neder. So on and so forth. Hakol mut, that's it. Mutter. Hataras Nedarim, so I will say, so when a Talmid Chacham is matir neder, he used lashon of mutter. What lashon does a husband use when he wants to annul his wife's neder? Mufarlech. Shabbos now the Gemara says, listen to this, if a chacham uses a lashon of mufar, or a husband uses a lashon of mutter, so the Gemara says, lo amar klum. That doesn't work. Which makes sense, right? A husband can't use the mechanism of hataras nedarim, and a Talmid Chacham can't use the mechanism of hafaras nedarim. The Sanya, because we learned zehadavar. And I will say the pasuk that the Gemara is quoting over here is zehadavar asher tziva, and then this is in Bamidbar zehadavar asher tziva, and then the Torah goes into the halachos of nedarim. So the Gemara is dashing over zehadavar means there is specific wording, specific verbiage that is used for different mechanisms by different people. It teaches us hachacham matir vein bal matir. A Talmid Chacham can be matir, hataras nedarim. A husband can't be matir. Shiyachol, because I might have thought to say, Uma Chacham she'ein mefer matir. A Chacham who doesn't have the ability to be mefer, has the ability to be matir. So say, bal shemefer, eno din shematir. A husband who can be mefer certainly should be able to be matir. Top of Ayin Ches, Talmud Lomar, Zehadavar. Therefore, the pasuk says Zehadavar, which the Gemara is dashing as Zehadibur. So a chacham matir ve'im ba matir. Everyone has their own lashon. So I will say, by the way, it's an interesting kal v'chomer, right? I would have thought a chacham who can't be mefer can be matir. Certainly, a husband who can be mefer can be matir. I will say, if you think about it, which is stronger, hafara or hatara? Which is stronger? It's interesting to contemplate. Bepashtos, at least according to the Gemara over here, sounds like hafara would be stronger. They both say, why is hafara stronger? Because hafara does not even require the consent of the vower. Remember, I will say, hafara is a process that can be visited upon the woman who vowed. Right? Rachel made her vow. She loves her vow. Vaharaya, she made it. She feels strongly about this vow. Ruvain, her husband, doesn't like it. What's Ruvain's power? What's Ruvain's power? Absolute and total revocation. Even though Rachel is protesting that revocation, Reuven, as opposed to Atara, remember again, the process of Atara has to be initiated by who? Has to be initiated by who? By the vower. Okay, in any event, Tanya Idach, another brayso, we'll say top of Ayin Ches. It's good that we got to today's daf. Tanya Idach, we'll say another brayso, Zad Davar, Bal Mefer, Ve'in Chacham Mefer. What do we learn from Zad Davar? A husband has the ability to do afara. A chacham doesn't have the ability to do afara. Shiyachol, you might have thought, Uma bal she'ein matir mefer. A husband who can't be matir can be mefer. Chacham shematir eino din shemefer. A chacham who can be matir, so they should be able to be mefer. Talmud lomar zehadavar bal mefer ve'in chacham mefer. Good. So we'll say, what's the takeaway? The takeaway over here is there are very distinct processes, right? And the lashon of hatara or mutter can only be used by a chacham, can't be used by a husband. And lashon of hafara, mefer lech, only used by a husband, can't be used by a Talmid Chacham. Incredible. So let's go back there. Ne'emar kan, we'll say a very interesting Gemara. Ne'emar kan zehadavar. So we'll say, it says over here being Nedarim, the lashon of zehadavar, v'ne'emar lahalon zehadavar b'shchutei chutz. And I will say, Torah speaks about zehadavar by shchutei chutz. And I will say, what's shchutei chutz? Shchutei chutz is the halacha that says that ultimately one is not permitted to go ahead and shecht karbanos outside of the Beis HaMikdash. And doing so carries with it a very serious transgression. So the same lashon of zehadavar is said by Nedarim and is said by shchutei chutz. Okay, so I will say, what exactly is what is the connection here? So listen to this. Ma b'shchutei chutz aron ubana v'chol Yisrael. Just like shchutei chutz, the prohibition to shech the carbon outside of the Beis HaMikdash applies to Aaron, his sons, and all of Klal Yisrael. Af parshas Nedarim Aaron ubanav v'chol Yisrael. So to parshas Nedarim applies to Aaron, his sons, and all of Klal Yisrael. Okay. Furthermore, umakan Rashi Hamatos. So just like I will say by Shchutei Chutz, it's referring to Rashi Hamatos, the leaders. Af lahalon Rashi Hamatos. Ultimately, again, by Nedarim, it also applies to Rashi Hamatos. Fine. So I will say, so what exactly this means, we're going to have to see. So Parshas Nedarim L'may Hilchasa. So I will say, so what exactly does this mean? So remember, so we're making this Gzera Shava now between Nedarim and between Shchutei Chutz. And here's what we're trying to say. Just like by Shchutei Chutz, it applies to Aaron, his sons, and Kol Yisrael. So to Nedarim applies to Aaron, his sons, and Kol Yisrael. And just like Shchutei Chutz, ultimately, just like Nedarim applies to Rashi Hamatos, so to Shchutei Chutz applies to Rashi Hamatos. We have absolutely no idea what this is talking about. So let's see. So the Gemara says, "Beparshas Nedarim l'may hilchasa." So we'll say, when it comes to Nedarim, what does it mean that it applies to Aaron, his sons, and all of Klal Yisrael? What does that mean? Amar Rav Bar Yaakov lahachshir shlosha hedyotos. So Rabbi say, this is fascinating. Because Rabbi say, Aaron and his sons is how many people? Is how many people? 3. Now remember again, this is after the death of Nadav and Avihu. So there's 3. So Rabbi say, so by Shchutei Chutz, the Torah uses the lashon of Aaron ubanav, and it says Zehadavar. So just like by Shchutei Chutz, Zehadavar applies to Aaron and his sons. So too by Nedarim, it applies to Aaron and his sons. Meaning what? That just like Aaron and his sons is 3, so by Nedarim it teaches us that Nedarim could be annulled by 3 people, but even 3 hedyotos. It doesn't have to be like Aaron and his sons who are mumchim, but rather even 3 hedyotos. Rashi Hamatos, but here's the problem. It says Rashi Hamatos. Now we'll say Rashi Hamatos sounds like what? Leadership. So it sounds like hedyotos are not enough. So Amrav Chisda v'Teimer Rabbi Yochanan biyachid mumche. So Rabbi says he's coming to teach you both. And this is very interesting. Aaron Ubanov teaches you that all you need is 3. And those 3 could even be what? Hedyotos. The Rashi Hamatos teaches you that you could use 1, but that 1 would have to be what? A mumcha. Fascinating. Rashi Hamatos b'shchutei chutz l'may hilchasa. Rabbi say, what do the Rashi Hamatos teach me by shchutei chutz? Amar Rav Sheshes Lomar sheyesh she'ela behektish. This is very interesting about this. So Rashi Hamatos by Shchutei Chutz teaches me that there is the concept ultimately again of she'ela by hektish. And I will say, what does that mean? Take a look at the Ran. I will say this is the second to last short line. Lomar sheyesh she'ela behektish. Listen to this. Shem hektish behema v'shachta. This is so fascinating. Let's say like this. I was makdish an animal, right? I consecrated an animal as a shlamim. And then what happens? V'shachta b'chutz. I shechted it outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Rabbi say major transgression. And then what happens? V'achar kach, first white line in the round. V'achar kach nishal aleh. Rabbi say then I did something very interesting. What did I do? I ultimately again went to have my neder revoked. So remember again, I made a neder to bring a shlamim, and I was madir. I pledged this animal as a shlamim. And this animal has shlamim kedusha. Now I shechted it outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Then what happens? I go to a chacham for hataras nedarim. for Ataras Nedarim. And the Chacham is matir my neder. Watch this. Potter. They will say, I'm potter. The Chayvan Sheish She'ela Behekdish, Ki'ilu Lo Ekdisha Ma'olam Dami, the Chacham Oker HaNeder Me'ikaro. They will say, listen to this. Because what does a Chacham do? I will say, when you go for Ataras Nedarim, a Chacham has the ability to retroactively annul the Neder. So therefore, it turns out, this is fascinating, so it turns out, I shechted a Shlomim outside of the Beis HaMikdash. After I shechted, I go to the Chacham for Ataras Nedarim, and he does so. It turns out that's what Rabbi was saying. If there's a difference between to the Neder, it turns out that's what? I never did Shchutei Chutz. The animal that I shechted, turns out, wasn't a Shlomim. Incredible. So the Gemara says, so therefore the Gemara says over here, so what is Rashi Hamatos come to teach me about Shchutei Chutz? It comes to teach me that there is She'ela Behekdish, that there is the ability to go ahead and literally be matir, my neder, that made this animal a carbon, and therefore once I do that, it retroactively takes away the prohibition of Shchutei Chutz. And I will say, take a quick look at the Rush for just a moment. So if you go straight across from where we were in the Ran, to go right, just move your finger to the right in the Rush, and go down about 6 lines. Lomar Shishela behekdish, shim shachat kachim b'chutz, v'nishal al hekdesho, nifter me carbon v'kares, v'huadin l'chol davar hakadosh b'motzes svasav, kigon truma u'maiser. So I will say, the chiddush over here is anything that you designate as being kodesh with your speech, if it can be designated as kodesh by speech, it has the effect, it has the power of a neder. And if it has the power of a neder, I will say, then it is subject to what? Hataras nedarim, revocation, all right, or better stated, annulment, right? It is subject to annulment. It's subject to hataras nedarim. And what that atara does, Rabbi say, is what? That atara has the ability, now we're going to talk about this more, to retroactively annul that neder. And therefore it turns out that the carbon that I shechted outside of the Beis HaMikdash wasn't even what? Wasn't a carbon. Because that retroactive annulment removed its carbonic designation. Incredible. So the Gemara says, that's fine if you hold that way. But l'Beis Shammai Damar ain't she'el behekdish. Rashi Amatos tichsib b'shchutei chutz l'may halchasa. But according to the Beis Shammai, who argues on this, and he says there is no she'ela by hekdish. You can't do ataras nedarim by hekdish. Then what does he do with the Rashi Amatos by shchutei chutz? To which he'll say Beis Shammai, let's look gzera shava. It might very well be that Beis Shammai doesn't hold of this gzera shava at all, right? That Beis Shammai doesn't hold of zehadavar gzera shava between Shchutei Chutz and Nedarim at all. So fine. So Zehadavar beparshas Nedarim l'maiksiv. So we'll say, what is Zehadavar by? So again, we're just going through the Gzera Shava. What does Zehadavar by Nedarim accomplish? Lomar Chacham Matir vein Baal Matir, Baal Mefer vein Chacham Mefer. So we'll say, so remember again, that's what we just said before. That's why we got into this. So Zehadavar by Nedarim teaches me that what? There's a specific dibur. There is a specific verbiage that has to be employed for a husband versus a chacham, and neither could use the other's lashon. So a husband cannot be matir, much in the same way that a chacham cannot be mefer. Zadar b'shchutei chutz l'maiksiv. So what do we do with zadavar by shchutei chutz? What is that for? Lomar ala shchita chayiv vein chayiv ala malika. So it's very interesting to teach, and it's fascinating. I will say we know that for bird karbanos, there's a process called malika, right? So malika, again, the Kohen grows out his thumbnail, and essentially what he does is he holds the bird in his hand with the neck of the bird facing him. He plunges his thumbnail into the back of the neck of the bird, severs right the vertebrae of the bird, and flicks off its head. So I will say, so ultimately, again, here's what's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see. I'm just saying, that's incredible. Halavai bizocha. So we'll say, so I'll just point out something very interesting, which is, the Gemara says over here, Zadavar teaches me that halacha l'maisa, when it comes to shchutei chutz, is very interesting. The halacha of shchutei chutz only applies to shchita, doesn't apply to malika. So if you were to take a carbon bird and shecht it outside of the Beis HaMikdash, that would be a biblical prohibition that would carry with a kares if you did intentionally. But if you did malika outside of the Beis HaMikdash, interestingly enough, it's not called shchutei chutz. Fascinating. El Beis Shammai lahachshir gimel hidyotos milah. So I'll say Beis Shammai, where does he know that 3 regular people could do ataras nedarim? Because remember again, the other opinions learned it out from the Gzeira Shava. If Beis Shammai doesn't also the Gzeira Shava, where does he learn it out from? So the Gemara says, Nafka luhu mid Rav Asi bar Nosan. He learns it from Rav Asi bar Nosan. Dichsiv. V'aydarim Moshe is very interesting. Very interesting. So I'll say another limud. Here we go. V'aydarim Moshe es Moadei Hashem al bnei Yisrael. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu spoke about Moadei Hashem, the Yomim Tovim, to Klal Yisrael. Now watch this. Fascinating but yet enigmatic brayso. Vatanya we learned. Rabbi Yosef Lili Omer Moadei Ne'emru v'lo Ne'emra Shabbos Bereishis Imoim. So Rabbi, listen to this. Rabbi Yosef Lili says, the Torah speaks about the Yom Tovim, but the Torah doesn't speak about Shabbos Bereishis. Doesn't speak about Shabbos. Okay, and I will say we're going to see the problem with that statement is the Torah does speak about Shabbos in the same exact section as Yom Tovim. I will say it's going to be in Parshas Pinchas, right? So the Torah does speak about Shabbos right by the Yom Tovim. Ben Azai says Moadei Ne'emru v'lo Ne'emru Parshas Nedarim. Ben Azai says it says Yom Tovim, but it doesn't say Parshas Nedarim. Okay, so what is going on over here? So Rav Asi bar Nosan kashile ha masnisa. So we'll say Rav Asi bar Nosan was bothered by this braysa. He didn't understand the braysa. And I will say now the reason he doesn't understand the braysa is why? Because halacha l'maisa, the Torah does speak. Rabbi Yosef Halili says in the section that the Torah speaks about the Yomim Tovim, it doesn't speak about Shabbos. It doesn't speak about Shabbos. So Rav Asi bar Nosan was bothered by this because that's not true. The Torah does speak about Shabbos in the same section. Rabbi say not only that, but Ben Azai said where it speaks about Yom Tovim, it does speak about Nedarim. That's also not true because in the very next section is the section of Nedarim. So Rabbi Asi bar Nosan did not understand this braysa. So watch this. This is incredible. Listen to this. So Asa Lenarda, he went to Narda to find someone who could explain it to him. So Asa Lenarda, the Kamed Rav Sheshas. So he went to find Rav Sheshas. Rav Sheshas is going to explain this to me. V'lo ashkeche, he couldn't find Rav Sheshas. He wasn't in Narda. Asa Abasrei Mechuza. So he heard that Rav Sheshas was in Mechuza. So he traveled from Narda to Mechuza. Rav will say, by the way, what a Musar Haskil. Sometimes in life, you start out searching for something, and you think you're going to find that something in a certain place. Then you get to that place, and that place could be geographic, or that place could be emotional, right? You're spiritual. You get to that place, and you don't find that thing. They will say, what happens 9 out of 10 times? You give up the search. They will say, what a Musar Haskil. Rav Asi bar Nosan is looking for Rav Sheshas. He travels to Narda. Rav Sheshas is not there. He doesn't do the thing that so many of us do, which is simply, I have so many beautiful ideas, but the moment they become a little bit inconvenient, or the moment they require a little bit more effort, all too often, I just stop. What does Rabbi Asi do? He's not in Narda. I heard he's in Mechuza. I'm going to travel to Mechuza. Because it will say, you have to ask yourself, why does the Gemara need to include this piece of information? Just tell me that Rav Asi caught up with Rav Sheshas. What do I care? That he went in, he heard he was in Narda, which is also, by the way, that number one, Rav Asi is not in Narda. So he heard he was in Narda, he goes to Narda, he's not in Narda, he hears he's in Mechuza, he goes to Mechuza. I will say to teach us this incredible lesson. If you want something in life, you're going to have to pursue it. If you want something in life, you're going to have to follow it. And just be ready that sometimes when you're following your dreams, your goals, your aspiration, and you think they're in one place, and you work hard to get to that place, and it's not there, don't give up. Don't give up. Keep moving. Keep traveling. If you want something badly enough in life, you have to be willing to work hard to get it. So what happens? Asa said, Amrle, so he finds him. That's the last piece of Musar Haskil. And if you work hard enough, and you're willing to follow your dreams, and you're willing to go out and travel from place to place to place to place, again, not necessarily geographically, but sometimes it's emotionally, spiritually, willing to work hard. And just because it becomes inconvenient, you don't give up on the things that are meaningful to you, ultimately, you'll find what you're looking for. So Rabbi Asi catches up with Rav Sheshas. Amrle, Moadi Hashem Nemru v'lo Nemru Shabbos Bereishis Imoim. So again, now Rav Asi is going through the Brisa with Rav Sheshes, and he says, Rabbi, I don't understand. Rabbi Yosef Lili said, it says the Yom Tovim, and it doesn't say Shabbos, but that's not true. V'aksiv Shabbos Imon. It does say Shabbos there in the same section. Shabbos is discussed by the Yom Tovim. V'su, furthermore, I don't understand the second part of Ben Azai, Mo'adei Hashem Nemru v'lo Nemru Parshas Nedarim Imoim v'ha misitra ksiva. So Rabbi Asi, I don't understand Ben Azai said, it says the section of Yom Tovim doesn't discuss Nedarim. That's also not true. Nedarim is in literally the next section of the Torah. So what is happening over here? What's happening? Rav Shesha says, Amarle Hachi Katani. Here's how you have to understand it. Rabbi say Ayin Ches Amud Beis 78b. So Rabbi say now Rav Shesha is explaining the Brisa to Rav Asi. See, here's what he says. So I will say, so Hachi Katani. Here's how you have to understand it. Amud Beis. Mo'adei Hashem tzrichin kiddush bezdin. Shabbos Bereishis ein tzricha kiddush bezdin. So I will say, here is what Rabbi Yossi Aglili was trying to explain. When he says that Shabbos is not written in the section of the Yom Tovim, he didn't literally mean that Shabbos is not included in the section. What he meant is that Shabbos is fundamentally different than Yom Tovim. How so? Because Mo'adei Hashem Yom Tovim require Kiddush Bezdin. Remember again, in order to have the Yom Tov, what do you need? Kiddush HaChodesh. Kiddush HaChodesh, sanctification of the new month, ultimately is dependent on Bezdin. So it's interesting. So the Yom Tovim, I will say, by the way, this is why. So therefore, the Yom Tovim require the intervention of Bezdin. Shabbos, I will say, when does Shabbos come? Seventh day. Ready or not? We all know that, right? Especially on short Fridays, right? Ready or not, right? It's Shabbos. Shabbos does not require any intervention or any participation of Bezdin. I will say, by the way, I'll just point out, where do you see this distinction reflected? In Kiddush, right? What do we say on Shabbos? Shabbos, we say, Baruch Atah Hashem, Mekadesh HaShabbos. Where does the sanctity of Shabbos come from? Hashem. Nothing to do with man. What do we say on Yom Tiv? Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim. What does Mekadesh Yisrael mean? Mekadesh Yisrael means Bezdin. Kadosh Baruch Hu, you endow us with sanctity. We in turn are Mekadesh the Chodesh. And because we are Mekadesh Chodesh, we sanctify the new month. Therefore, the Hazmanim, we create the sanctity of the Yom Tovim. So that's what Rabbi Yosef really meant. What he meant is Shabbos is not written in the section of Yom Tovim, meaning Yom Tiv requires the intervention of Beis Din through Kiddush HaChodesh. Shabbos does not. Rabbi Yosef, take a quick look at the Rush on the left-hand column, top left-hand column. Mo'adei Hashem tzrichin Kiddush. He says, Shemekachin Beis Din Rosh Chodesh Nisan, Lasos Pesach, Bechamisha Sarbo. Good, he's giving Pesach an example. Shabbos Bereishis, Lefishigam HaMoadim Kriyim Shabbos, Lochi Kari Le Shabbos Bereishis. I will say, by the way, Rosh just pointed out, why does Rabbi Yosef refer to Shabbos as Shabbos Bereishis? So the Rosh says over here, because Yom Tiv is also referred to as Shabbos. So how do you know when you're referring to Shabbos, what we call Shabbos? We call Shabbos Bereishis. Now, it doesn't literally mean the Shabbos that we read Parshas Bereishis, but rather Shabbos Bereishis means Shabbos. Good. So that's what Rabbi Yosef really meant in the Brisa. Furthermore, so the Gemara is right. So Mo'adei Hashem tzrichin Kiddush Beis Din Shabbos Bereishis ein tzricha Kiddush Beis Din. Furthermore, both say second line from the top, Ayin Chesam Beis. Furthermore, Mo'adei Hashem tzrichin Mumcha vein Parshas Nedarim tzrichin Mumcha. Both say similarly, when Ben Azai said that the section of Nedarim is not written in the Yom Tovim. Now that's not a true statement. In other words, the section of Nedarim immediately follows the section of the Yom Tovim. What did he mean? What he meant was the halachos of Nedarim are different than the halachos ultimately again of Kiddush HaChodesh, of the sanctification of the Yom Tovim in the new month. How so? Because ultimately again, so he says, Kiddush Mo'adei Hashem tzrichin Mumcha. I will say, in order to sanctify the Yom Tovim, what do you have to do? You have to sanctify the new month, Kiddush HaChodesh. Kiddush HaChodesh can only be done through experts. Bein Parshas Nedarim tzrichin Mumcha. Yet Rabbi say, when it comes to Ataras Nedarim does not need a Mumcha. That's what Rabbi Yosef really meant. Sorry, that's what Ben Azai meant when he said the Parsha of Nedarim is not written by the Yom Tovim. Rather, it could even be afilu beis din hadyotos. Rabbi say the beis din that establishes the new month has to be an expert beis din, which makes sense. There's a lot riding on that. Has to be an expert beis din. So when Ben Azai says the section of Nedarim is not written by the section of the Yomim Tovim, what he meant was section of Yomim Tovim, i.e. Kiddush HaChodesh requires a beis din of mumchim, experts. Hataras Nedarim does not. Hataras Nedarim could even have a beis din of hedyotos. Incredible. Vaha parshas Nedarim rashi amatos. But one second, I will say, here's what's interesting. I'm sorry, let me read that again. Vaha beparshas Nedarim rashi hamatos ksiv. But I will say, let's not forget that there is a lashon of rashi hamatos used by Nedarim. And I will say, what does rashi hamatos mean? Leadership. So maybe the Torah is telling me that Hataras Nedarim, in fact, does require mumchim. Amrav Chista v'yitim Rabbi Yochanan biyachid mumcha. You're right. In other words, I will say, there is a model of Hataras Nedarim which requires a mumcha. What's the model? A yachid mumcha. I will say, so again, enochinami, by Hataras Nedarim, if you want to use one individual, you're going to require an expert. But if you're willing to use and that's Rashi Amatos. Rashi Amatos tells us that if you're going to use one individual for Hataras Nedarim, he has to be like a leader of Klal Yisrael, i.e. a mumcha. But if you're going to use a beis din could even be shalosh hadyotos. Incredible. So we'll say that ends that Gzera Shava. Absolutely fascinating. We both say this is an incredible case. I'm going to be Chanina. Get ready. Hashosek amanas lamekit. So we'll say, listen to this. Reuven's married to Rachel. Rachel makes a neder, right? Now we'll say, now what happens over here? Reuven doesn't say anything after she makes the neder. Now, normally, silence is construed as, or not even construed. What does silence in the face of a neder represent? Affirmation. Now remember again, it's not immediate silence, because remember again, he has the whole day. In other words, he doesn't have to react immediately. He has the entire day, which I will say, by the way, if you think about it, is also such a must. So we're going to see, this is going to come up in this case. I will say, sometimes situations of nedarim between husbands and wives, right, that a wife makes, could often be the result of something else happening within a marriage. Some type of strife, some type of conflict. So the Ribbon Shalom in his infinite wisdom understood that sometimes the worst thing you could do in the face of marital conflict is what? Well, first, respond immediately, right? Sometimes it's not a good idea to say the first thing that comes to your mind, right? When you are in the midst of a moment of marital strife. Because often they're not necessarily the most intelligent things. Sometimes they're incredibly hurtful things. So it's interesting that the Torah gives like a day. So therefore, again, the wife can make a neder, the husband's silent. That immediate silence does not mean anything. In this case over here, we'll say what's happening over here is as follows. Rachel made a neder. And ultimately, again, Reuven is silent. Now, why is he being silent? If you look at the Rush for just a moment, actually, we can look at the Ran and the Rush, but let's start with the Rush. So we'll say the Rush is in the left-hand column. It's like halfway down in the Rush. Lahaknit ulitzar ishto aval daito lahafer. So we'll say his intention is to annul the neder. Right? But rather, what is he doing? He's silent. Right? Why is he silent? He's causing her distress. Now we'll say, why is he causing her? In other words, take a look at the Ran also. So the Ran also over here is 6 lines up from the bottom. Now I will say, so why is he distressing her? So I will say, it's interesting. You could see this. You could read this into so many marital situations. I will say, you could have a situation where sometimes a wife purposely makes an neder because she's upset about something with the complete expectation that her husband's going to annul it, right? And he doesn't annul it. Which I will say is an incredible yisod also because sometimes, and it's so important in a marriage, that sometimes a spouse says hurtful things. Sometimes the hurtful thing is not meant to hurt, but the hurtful thing is meant to elicit a response, because a spouse is not hearing something they need to hear. So it's not the right way to go about eliciting a response. But sometimes it happens all the time. And it's so important to understand that sometimes the spouse says something, they don't mean to hurt me. They're hurting. and they're saying something to get me to respond because I'm not responding. I'm not engaged. So it's not the right thing to do, but Lamaisa, it is a mechanism or it is a dynamic that often happens. So you can see a situation where either Rachel made a neder that she knows Reuven is going to annul it, but she needs him to react, but he's not reacting. Or conversely, she made a neder that she really wants. He pretends like he's going to go ahead and affirm it, whereas he has every intention of revoking it. But the point over here is, he's quiet now, which looks like acquiescence, but he has every intention ultimately of revoking it in the future. So what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, Mefer afilu mikan va'ad yud yomim. Rabbi Chanina says he has the ability to revoke it even 10 days later. Even 10 days later. So I will say, so this is very interesting, because what Rabbi Chanina seems to be saying is, as long as you have the intent to revoke it on the day of the neder, and you have a reason for your silence, that buys you extra time for revocation. All right, Massive Rabbi raises the cash on this, and he says, so we'll say, remember again, we actually had this sugya last week. This is the beginning of the parak of Nara Murasa. Remember again, we'll say Nara Murasa, father and husband share revocatory power. So what happens? When do we say that if the husband died, the arus died, that the power of revocation fully vests back to the father? Bisman shelo shama habal, o sheshama v'shasach. That's talking about a case where the husband did not hear about the neder, or he heard about the neder and he was quiet. Oh, sheshama v'hafer. Or he heard about the neder and he died. On that same day. Aval shama v'kiyeh. But I will say, if you heard about the neder and he upheld it, oh, sheshama v'shasak umeis bayom, or he heard about it, but he was silent on that day. I'm sorry, umeis bayom shalachar, and he died the next day. So he heard about it, and then he died the next day. So what's the halacha? Ein yachal l'hafer. The surviving father does not have the ability to go ahead and annul it. So you see that there's a case where if the husband is silent on the full day of the neder, that's it. So my love b'shosik amanas make it. Are we not talking about a case of where the husband was silent in order to distress her? In other words, I will say what he's playing games over here. In other words, he's being silent in order to make it look like he's affirming the neder, but in fact, his intention is to go ahead and annul the neder. Lo b'shosek almanas l'kayim. No, his intention is to go ahead and what? His intention is to go ahead and he's quiet with the intention to go ahead and uphold it. To which the Gemara says, 1 second, if he's quiet with the intention to uphold it, ihachi, hainu oshama v'kiyem, then that's the previous case. That's the case of where he heard it and upheld it. Ella b'shosek stam. Rather, we're talking about a case where he was quiet and we don't know what his intentions were. Right? So then the Gemara is saying, if we're quiet, we don't know what his intentions were, and then he died on the next day, the revocatory power does not vest back to the father. So we'll say, what the Gemara is essentially saying over here is that halach. So again, remember, we are trying to answer a very simple question. What's our simple question? Well, it's not such a simple question. We have Rabbi Chanina, and Rabbi Chanina is saying that halacha l'maisa, well, actually, we're going to stop over today, but Rabbi Chanina says that halacha l'maisa, if a husband is quiet on the day his wife made the neder, but he has every intention of revoking it, but he's only going ahead and being quiet. Why? To distress her, right? To make her upset. Rabbi Chanina says he can revoke it even 10 days later. Rava is challenging that. Rava's first challenge against Rabbi Chanina failed. We'll stop over here today. We'll pick up with the subsequent challenge tomorrow. I will say, Shkoyach. All right, Chevron Zoom, have a great day, everyone.